The mahogany table in the high-rise law firm felt like an altar for a sacrifice. Across from an arrogant, soon-to-be ex-husband expecting tears, sat a woman who had spent 5 years playing the fool. When the pen hit the paper, there was no weeping, only a chilling, triumphant smile. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Tribeca penthouse, but inside the climate was entirely controlled, sterile and cold. Celeste Brooks stood by the glass, a cup of untouched black coffee in her hand, staring down at the glowing arteries of New York City. For 5 years, this sprawling, $50 million fortress had been her home. By noon today, she would be nothing more than a ghost haunting its minimalist hallways. Ryan Mitchell, her husband, and the celebrated CEO of Mitchell Data Solutions, was still asleep in the master bedroom. He had come home at 3 a.m, smelling faintly of expensive bourbon and Maison Francis Kurkdjian perfume, a scent Celeste distinctly did not wear. It was the signature fragrance of Chloe Davis Mitchell Data's 26-year-old director of public relations. Celeste had known about the affair for 8 months. The discovery hadn't been a dramatic cinematic moment involving a lipstick-stained collar or a misplaced text message. It had been a careless financial discrepancy. Celeste, a former venture capitalist who had surrendered her own thriving career to help Ryan build his empire from a cramped garage startup, still had access to the offshore shell accounts. She had noticed the 6-figure wire transfers to a boutique real estate firm, tracing them back to a luxury loft leased in Chloe's name. Most women would have screamed. Some would have thrown Ryan's bespoke Italian suits onto the street. Celeste did neither. Instead, she walked into her private study, locked the door, and began to dismantle Ryan Mitchell's life brick by digital brick. To the outside world, Celeste was the perfect docile society wife. She hosted the charity galas, smiled for the paparazzi, and stood faithfully in Ryan's shadow while he accepted the accolades. Ryan, fueled by his own narcissism, genuinely believed Celeste was utterly dependent on him. He frequently reminded her in a tone dripping with condescension that he was the golden goose. "You have a comfortable life, Celeste," he had told her just weeks prior, carelessly buttoning his cuffs before heading to another late-night strategy session. "Don't complicate it by asking too many questions about the business. You wouldn't understand the restructuring anyway." He was right about one thing: the restructuring was complicated. But Celeste understood it perfectly. She understood that Ryan had quietly leveraged the company's core assets to fund a massive, highly risky acquisition of a European tech firm. She also understood that his board of directors was entirely unaware of the massive debt he was accumulating. Over the past 8 months, Celeste hadn't just been grieving the death of her marriage. She had been working. She had reached out to old contacts, navigated encrypted channels, and secured private meetings in dimly lit hotel lounges. She gathered every shred of evidence of Ryan's corporate malfeasance, his embezzlement to fund his extravagant lifestyle with Chloe, and his illegal suppression of shareholder information. As the morning light began to break through the storm clouds, Celeste turned away from the window. She walked into the massive walk-in closet and bypassed the designer gowns Ryan had bought her to play the part of his trophy. Instead, she reached for a tailored charcoal grey Tom Ford suit, an outfit she hadn't worn since her Wall Street days. It was armor. When Ryan finally emerged from the bedroom, nursing a hangover and clutching a green juice his private chef had prepared, he barely looked at her. "The lawyers are expecting us at 11, Ryan muttered, rubbing his temples. "Let's just get this over with, Celeste. Don't make a scene. Peter drew up the papers exactly as we discussed. You get the ski chalet in Aspen and a monthly stipend. It's more than generous considering the prenup." Celeste adjusted her watch, a simple, leather-banded timepiece that had belonged to her grandfather, a stark contrast to the diamond-encrusted Cartier Ryan had gifted her. "I have no intention of making a scene." "Ryan," Celeste said, her voice smooth and devoid of any emotion, "I just want what's rightfully mine." Ryan let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "What's yours is what I decide to give you. Let's not forget who built this life." Celeste offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. "I haven't forgotten a single thing." The offices of Harrington and Associates occupied the entire 60th floor of a midtown skyscraper. The conference room was a monument to corporate intimidation, featuring a massive slab of polished mahogany and panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. Celeste sat on one side of the table, entirely alone. She had dismissed her own legal counsel 2 days prior, a move that had sent Ryan into a fit of mocking laughter. Across from her sat Ryan, flanked by his bulldog of an attorney, Peter Lawson, and 2 junior associates who looked like they were terrified to even breathe. "Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed without representation?" "Ms. Brooks?" Peter asked, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. He pushed a thick stack of documents across the table. "This is highly irregular. Once you sign this, you waive your right to any future claims against Mr. Mitchell's assets, his company, or his future earnings." "I am perfectly capable of reading a contract, Peter," Celeste replied, keeping her posture impeccably straight. Ryan leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He looked impatient, checking his phone every few seconds. Celeste knew exactly who he was texting. Chloe was likely waiting at a celebratory brunch downtown, ready to pop the champagne the moment the ink was dry. "Just sign the damn papers, Celeste." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I've secured your future. You'll never have to work a day in your life. Most people would be thanking me." Celeste reached for the Mont Blanc pen resting on top of the documents. She didn't look at the financial settlement. She didn't care about the Aspen chalet or the insulting alimony figure. She turned directly to the final page, the binding severance of their union. The room fell dead silent. The only sound was the scratching of the gold nib against the heavy parchment paper. Celeste Brooks. She signed it with a flourish, placed the pen down, and looked up. For the first time in 5 years, the heavy, suffocating mask she had worn for Ryan dropped completely. A genuine, radiant smile broke across her face. It wasn't a smile of relief or sorrow. It was the chilling, predatory smile of a grandmaster saying checkmate. Ryan frowned, visibly unsettled by her reaction. "What's so funny?" "Nothing, Ryan," Celeste said, standing up and smoothing the front of her suit. "I was just thinking about how much lighter I feel." Peter hastily gathered the documents, looking at Celeste as if she had lost her mind. "Well, that concludes the mediation. A judge will rubber-stamp this by Friday." Celeste didn't say another word. She turned on her heel and walked out of the conference room, the sharp click of her stilettos echoing down the marble hallway. Ryan caught up to her at the elevator bank. He couldn't stand the idea that he hadn't broken her. He needed the tears. He needed the validation of her devastation. "Where are you going to go?" Ryan asked, a cruel smirk returning to his face. "Are you going back to your parents' place in Ohio? I can have my driver take you to the airport." The elevator doors chimed and slid open. Celeste stepped inside and turned to face him. "I won't be needing your driver, Ryan." "Suit yourself," he scoffed, stepping into the adjacent elevator as his lawyers followed him. "Enjoy the subway." They rode down in separate cars, but fate, or perhaps Celeste's impeccable timing, had them exiting the lobby onto the bustling Fifth Avenue pavement at the exact same moment. The storm from the morning had cleared, leaving the city air crisp and biting. Ryan raised his hand to signal his waiting chauffeur, expecting his familiar black Escalade. But his driver was blocked. Idling directly in front of the building's revolving doors was a custom, midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a vehicle so aggressively opulent that even the jaded New York pedestrians were stopping to stare. Ryan scoffed. "Some people just have to show off," he muttered to Peter, waiting for the massive car to move. But the Rolls-Royce didn't move. Instead, the rear door swung open. Stepping out onto the curb was a man who caused the blood to instantly drain from Ryan Mitchell's face. He was tall, impeccably dressed, in a bespoke navy suit with striking silver hair at his temples and piercing blue eyes. Archer Bailey. Archer was the founder and CEO of Bailey Global, a ruthless conglomerate that had been trying to hostilely take over Mitchell Data Solutions for the past 3 years. Archer was a bona fide billionaire, a titan of industry who operated on a level of wealth and power that made Ryan look like a reckless amateur. Ryan froze his arrogant smirk, melting into pure confusion. Bailey, what the hell is he doing here? Archer didn't even glance in Ryan's direction. He stood by the open door of the Rolls-Royce, looking directly at the lobby entrance. Celeste walked past Ryan, her shoulder brushing his, not sparing him a single look. She walked straight up to Archer Bailey. Archer's notoriously stoic face softened into a warm, genuine smile. He reached out gently, taking Celeste's hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Are you finished with the paperwork, my dear?" Archer asked, his deep, resonant voice carrying effortlessly over the city noise. "All signed," Celeste replied, her voice ringing clear like a bell. "I am officially a free woman." "Excellent," Archer murmured. "Then we have a great deal of work to do. The board is waiting for the files." Ryan stumbled forward, pushing past a bewildered pedestrian. "Celeste. What is this? How do you know Archer Bailey?" Celeste finally turned to look at her ex-husband. The panic in his eyes was intoxicating. "I told you not to worry about my future, Ryan," Celeste said smoothly. "I've decided to go back to work. Archer has graciously appointed me as the new Chief Acquisitions Officer for Bailey Global." Ryan's mouth opened, but no words came out. His mind raced, connecting dots that formed a horrifying picture. The corporate leaks over the last month, the sudden aggressive moves by Bailey's proxies on his company's debt, the restructuring he thought was a secret. The files, Ryan choked out his voice, pitching higher. "What files?" Archer Bailey finally looked at Ryan, his eyes as cold as absolute zero. "The files regarding your little European misadventure Mitchell, and the off-the-books ledgers. Celeste has been exceptionally thorough. It seems you've severely breached your fiduciary duties. We're launching a hostile takeover by morning, and your board is already cooperating with us." Ryan looked like he was going to vomit right there on Fifth Avenue. "Celeste, you gave him my proprietary data. You destroyed my company." Celeste smiled that same beautiful, terrifying smile she had worn in the conference room. "I didn't destroy anything," Ryan Celeste whispered, stepping into the plush interior of the Rolls-Royce. "I just handed over the hammer. You built the glass house." Archer stepped in behind her, shutting the heavy door with a solid, definitive thud. The privacy glass rolled up entirely, cutting Ryan off from the woman he had underestimated for 5 years. As the Rolls-Royce pulled smoothly away from the curb, merging into the New York traffic, Ryan Mitchell stood frozen on the sidewalk. He wasn't just divorced, he was ruined, and he realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that Celeste hadn't just walked away with nothing. She had walked away with everything. Panic is a distinct metallic scent, and by Monday morning, the executive suite of Mitchell Data Solutions reeked of it. Ryan Mitchell paced the length of his corner office, his usually pristine Brioni tie hanging loosely around his neck. His phone had been ringing incessantly since the market opened. The stock was plunging. Rumors of a hostile takeover by Bailey Global had leaked to the Wall Street Journal, sending shareholders into a frenzy. "Get me Peter on the line now," Ryan barked at his terrified assistant, slamming a hand onto his polished oak desk. When the intercom finally buzzed, Peter Lawson's voice lacked its usual arrogant drawl. He sounded out of breath. "Ryan, it's worse than we thought. Bailey didn't just buy up the outstanding debt. They've filed an injunction with the SEC. They are claiming massive fiduciary negligence on your part regarding the Berlin acquisition." "How is that possible?" Ryan yelled, his voice cracking. "That was buried. Nobody knew the European firm was insolvent. We cooked the books through the Cayman subsidiaries. Only I had those ledgers." "Not just you," Peter replied grimly. "Celeste had them. She appended over 400 pages of internal communications and offshore wire transfers to the SSEC filing. Ryan, she didn't just walk away with Archer Bailey. She's the one leading the acquisition. And the board has called an emergency meeting. They're locking you out." Before Ryan could respond, the heavy glass doors of his office swung open. Chloe Davis, his PR director and mistress, rushed in. She looked frantic, clutching a sleek iPad to her chest. "Ryan, the press is outside." Chloe gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Bloomberg is running a live segment about the embezzlement. My phone is blowing up. Are we broke?" "Tell me we aren't broke." Ryan stared at the 26-year-old woman he had thrown his marriage away for. In the harsh, unforgiving light of impending ruin, the charm he once found in her youth now just looked like sheer incompetence. "Shut up, Chloe. Just let me think." Meanwhile, 30 blocks south at the hypermodern headquarters of Bailey Global, Celeste Brooks sat at the head of a massive glass conference table. She wore a sharp, ivory Alexander McQueen suit, sipping Earl Grey tea as she reviewed the morning's financial slaughter. Archer Bailey stood by the window, admiring the view of Central Park. He turned to look at her, a profound respect in his gaze. He had known Celeste years ago, back when she was a ruthless prodigy at Sequoia Capital, long before she had dimmed her own light to play the supportive wife to a mediocre man. When Celeste had contacted him 8 months ago with the proposition of a lifetime, Archer had recognized the fire immediately. "The stock has dropped 40%, Celeste," Archer noted, checking his watch. "The board of Mitchell Data is begging for a lifeline. They are ready to vote him out and accept our terms." "Give it another hour," Celeste said smoothly, her eyes never leaving the digital tablet in front of her. "Let the panic truly set in. I want the shareholders so desperate they'll sign away his severance package entirely to save themselves." Archer chuckled a low, booming sound. "You are terrifying, my dear. Remind me never to cross you." "Just honor our contract, Archer, and we'll be fine," Celeste smiled. "I bring you $1 billion data infrastructure for pennies on the dollar, and you give me the CEO chair of the newly merged subsidiary." "A deal is a deal," Archer agreed. "Shall we head to the guillotine?" At precisely 1 o'clock, Celeste and Archer walked into the executive boardroom of Mitchell Data Solutions. The room was packed with the 12 members of the board, mostly older, grey-haired men who had spent years enabling Ryan's ego. Now they looked like cornered animals. Ryan was seated at the far end, sweating profusely, a desperate feral look in his eyes. When Celeste walked in, he shot up from his chair. "You have no right to be here," Ryan spat, pointing a trembling finger at her. "This is a closed corporate meeting." Celeste didn't flinch. She calmly took the seat directly opposite him, placing a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the table. "Actually, Ryan, I have every right," Celeste said, her voice echoing off the acoustic panels. "As of this morning, Bailey Global owns 51% of the voting shares, thanks to a private buyout from your 3 largest institutional investors. We are the majority. Sit down." The chairman of the board, a stoic man named Harrison, cleared his throat, looking everywhere but at Ryan. "Ryan, please take your seat. Ms. Brooks, Or rather, Ms. Bailey Proxy has the floor. Celeste opened the portfolio. Gentlemen, let's skip the theatrics. You are currently looking at federal indictments for corporate fraud because your CEO decided to use company assets as his personal piggy bank to fund a disastrous European expansion and a rather expensive mistress. However, Bailey Global is prepared to absorb the debt and clear the insolvency. Ryan slammed his fists on the table. Don't listen to her. We can weather this. We restructure. We file Chapter 11, and we keep control. Celeste looked at him with a mixture of pity and absolute disdain. Restructure with what money, Ryan? Your personal assets are tied to the company's valuation, which is currently in freefall. Your reputation is ash, and the SEC is freezing your accounts by midnight. She turned back to the board. Here are the terms. Bailey acquires Mitchell data. Ryan is terminated immediately for cause voiding his golden parachute. In exchange, we protect the board from personal liability in the upcoming SEC probe. You have 5 minutes to vote. It didn't take 5 minutes. It took 45 seconds. The vote was unanimous. Ryan Mitchell was ousted from the empire he claimed to have built alone. He stood there hyperventilating, realizing that the woman he had treated as a decorative accessory for 5 years had meticulously engineered a trap he could never escape. "You're a monster," Ryan whispered, the fight completely draining out of him. "No, Ryan," Celeste replied, snapping the portfolio shut. "I'm just a venture capitalist, and I decided it was time to liquidate a bad investment." The rain had returned to New York City by Tuesday evening, casting a dreary, cinematic gloom over the skyline. Ryan stood in the middle of the luxury Tribeca loft he had leased for Chloe. He had spent the last 36 hours dodging reporters, frantically calling his offshore bankers at Credit Suisse, and drinking heavily. The offshore accounts were supposed to be his safety net. Over the years, he had funneled nearly $12 million into a blind trust in the Cayman Islands. If the company fell, he could still run. He could still live like a king. But Mr. DuPont, his private wealth manager, had delivered the fatal blow over the phone that morning. "I am sorry, Mr. Mitchell." DuPont had said, his Swiss accent crisp and unsympathetic. "The accounts were flagged by an international court order. Your ex-wife's legal counsel filed an injunction during your divorce mediation, citing hidden marital assets. Because you signed the final divorce decree, waiving your right to contest her financial discoveries, the funds have been legally seized and transferred to her estate. You have zero balance." Ryan had dropped the phone. Celeste hadn't just taken the company. She had drained his secret reserves. The waiver he had so arrogantly demanded she sign without a lawyer had actually been a trap. Peter Lawson, his highly paid idiot of an attorney, hadn't bothered to check the addendums Celeste had slipped into the final draft. The sound of a zipper violently closing pulled Ryan from his spiraling thoughts. Chloe was dragging 2 massive Louis Vuitton trunks toward the front door of the loft. She had swapped her usual designer office wear for a cashmere tracksuit, large dark sunglasses perched on her head, despite the lack of sun. "What are you doing?" Ryan slurred, stumbling toward her. "Chloe, where are you going?" Chloe didn't even look at him as she hoisted her Birkin bag onto her shoulder. "I'm leaving Ryan. My publicist says being associated with you right now is career suicide. I'm 26. I can't afford a federal subpoena." "You're leaving me?" Ryan scoffed a hysterical laugh, bubbling in his chest. "After everything I gave you. This loft, the jewelry, the promotion." Chloe finally turned her lip, curling in disgust. "You didn't give me anything that actually belonged to you, Ryan. You stole it from your wife and your company. And now you're broke. What did you expect, that we'd move to Ohio and work at a grocery store?" Before Ryan could form a response, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed on the heavy mahogany door of the loft. Chloe frowned, stepping back as Ryan moved to open it. He expected reporters, or perhaps the federal marshals. Instead, standing in the hallway were two burly security guards in dark suits and a familiar face holding a clipboard. It was a representative from Douglas Elliman, the luxury real estate management firm. "Mr. Mitchell," the property manager said, his tone entirely devoid of warmth. "We are here to oversee the vacation of the premises." Ryan blinked, trying to clear his alcohol-fogged brain. "Vacations, what are you talking about?" "My name is on this lease. The rent is paid through the end of the year." The property manager adjusted his glasses. The lease was held by Mitchell Data Solutions as a corporate expense. Following the acquisition yesterday, the new parent company, Bailey Global, audited all non-essential real estate holdings. This property has been sold. "Sold in one day?" Ryan demanded. "To who?" A voice rang out from down the hallway, sharp and clear. "To me." The security guard stepped aside. Celeste walked forward, wearing a stunning emerald green trench coat that perfectly complemented her newly revived spirit. She looked completely in her element, powerful, radiant, and utterly untouchable. Ryan staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. "Celeste, you bought the loft." "Cash." Celeste smiled, stepping over the threshold and looking around the opulent space with a critical eye. She glanced at Chloe, who was shrinking against the wall, clutching her designer bag like a shield. "I must say, Chloe, your taste in modern art is dreadful. But the square footage is excellent. I plan on gutting the place and turning it into a private gym." Chloe swallowed hard. "I was just leaving Miss Brooks." "See that you do," Celeste said dismissively. "Leave the keys on the counter." Chloe practically ran out the door, her rolling luggage clattering loudly down the hallway, leaving Ryan entirely alone with the architect of his destruction. Ryan fell to his knees. The arrogance, the narcissism, the cruel superiority, all of it had been stripped away, leaving nothing but a hollow, broken shell of a man. "Why?" Ryan whispered, tears finally spilling over his cheeks, the tears he had wanted from her. "Why did you have to take everything you won? You got the company. Why this?" Celeste looked down at him, her expression hardening. There was no pity in her eyes, only the cold, hard justice of a woman who had spent 5 years being told she was nothing. "You told me not to complicate things, Ryan. You told me to remember who built this life," Celeste said softly, leaning down slightly so her voice was the only thing he could hear. "I remembered. I built the foundation you stood on. I secured the venture capital that started your company. I smoothed over every mistake you made. You just got so used to standing on my back, you forgot I could stand up." She straightened up, adjusting the lapels of her emerald coat. "You have 20 minutes to pack whatever fits in a single suitcase." "Ryan," Celeste commanded, signaling the security guards to step inside. "After that, they are locking the doors. Have a nice life." Celeste turned and walked out of the loft. She didn't look back. Down on the street, the midnight blue Rolls-Royce was waiting for her. The rain had stopped, and the late afternoon sun was just beginning to peek through the concrete canyons of the city, casting long golden shadows across the pavement. Archer Bailey was sitting in the back seat, reading the Financial Times. He looked up as Celeste slid into the plush leather interior. "How did the eviction go?" Archer asked, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Exactly as expected," Celeste replied, letting out a long, cleansing breath. She felt lighter than she had in half a decade. The heavy chains of her disastrous marriage were gone, replaced by the thrilling weight of corporate power and reclaimed independence. "Good," Archer said, handing her a sleek black folder. because your first official board meeting as CEO of the new Bailey Data Division is at 8 tomorrow morning. We have a lot of restructuring to do." Celeste took the folder, the gold-embossed letters gleaming in the dim light of the car. She opened it, scanning the aggressive growth strategies and the global expansion plans she had drafted herself. She wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. She was a titan. "Let them know I'll be running the meeting." Celeste smiled, leaning back against the seat as the Rolls-Royce surged forward into the vibrant, beating heart of New York City. "And tell them to bring plenty of coffee. We are going to build an empire." If you loved this story of ultimate revenge and reclaiming power, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling dramas, shocking plot twists, and empowering real-life stories delivered every single week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out.